So you're mentioning of the Staples Center and Jason Blair and Jack Kelly leads to the question, is journalism less ethical than it used to be because we're seeing all these big journalism ethics scandals, or is it more ethical and it's just that there's more scrutiny now and we catch the perpetrators more than we might have in the past? Or do you think it's more complicated that journalism is more ethical in some ways but less ethical in other ways?
I see it as more ethical across the board, and I think that the fact that Jason Blair, Jack Kelly gets the treatment it does is that it is unusual today, and Romanesco on the pointer.org website that Romanesco collects transgressions, among other things, anything that gets in the paper. And most editors today feel that if they have a plagiarist or a fabricator, that they not only had to deal with that in a personnel standpoint, but they also had to publicize it because the audience has been misled. When that goes online, as it all does today, then Romanesco's search engines pick it up, and now everybody in the country knows about it. So I think all of that leads to an impression, which probably is shared by the public, that that journalists are crooks. Every time you pick up a paper, you're reading about somebody doing something like that. Well, that too is an exaggeration, but the fact is that when I started in the business, that was simply didn't meet the standard of news because it wasn't unusual. Now it is. So now it gets publicity, it creates an erroneous impression. A few years ago, when we had a spate, this was 1998, when there were a series of ethical transgressions that were very high profile, there were some polls done, and the public thought that they do it all the time. But of course, we knew otherwise, and I think that it's only got better. More and more journalists today are better educated, and more of them have courses such as one you teach here at Penn State. So they've been exposed to this sort of thing. And I think that they have more practice in making decisions, and they've worked with case studies, and they know the principles, and they know what the standards of the profession are. So I would have to think that there's far, far less ethical transgressions today.
So when you think about things like avoiding conflicts of interest, that can often be fairly clear what's acceptable and what isn't. And certainly when you're talking about plagiarism and fabrication, those cases are really clear, what's acceptable and what isn't. But what about, when you get into some of the murkier areas like the use of anonymous sources and letting people go on the record, go off the record, and how have the standards changed in those areas over time, and where do you think we are right now, and do they need to change some more, or does enforcement need to be tighter still?
Yes, I think that there's still anonymous sources, a very, very difficult area for us, and one that we did. I don't believe that our business has got our arms around yet at all. I think that in an abstract, if you got a bunch of journalists together in a seminar, they would agree that they would say that, and they're correct in my opinion. There's some stories that are so important, and they can only be got by protecting your source, because these people are taking a chance and giving you the information, the whistleblowers. But I think that they might agree in such a seminar on the abstract that it ought to be very, very limited. But then when they get to writing stories, they start putting it in. And the Times has gone through some New York Times interesting studies on that their policy is to highly restrict anonymous sources, and so they've tried to reduce that. And the AP, of course, has a policy. They had to explain why a person is going off the record or is anonymous, and I don't know if this. I personally don't think it works very much to say. The person spoke on condition of anonymity because it has not been publicly announced. Well, that doesn't tell me a whole lot, other than he's speaking out of turn. But that's the sort of thing we're still trying to figure out how to deal with that, and to get the word out that we really mean it when we say don't use anonymous sources. Clark Hoyt, the public editor, got the a class at Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism to study the Times for 6 months before they announced their tightening up policy, and 6 months later, or 6 years later, or 6 months in a later period, and he did find that they reduced it, but they didn't come close to stamping it out. And Keller, Bill Keller, the editor, pointed out to staff, we still have a long way to go.
Does the public care about this?
I think that, I don't know if they will write a letter to the editor about it, it'll rise to that level. But my theory, and I've felt this for a long time, is that all the surveys show that they tend not to trust us. I think that's misplaced, and I think they really do trust the papers and the stations that they listen to and watch and read daily, but they have this antipathy toward the news media. And I believe that given the fact that they tend to be cynical about what we do, we shouldn't ask them, this is important what we heard from this person. We can't tell you where we heard it, but trust us, we know that somebody actually told us. I think there's a lot of cynicism there that they don't really believe that. And it's like, well, they may not rise to the point where they want to complain about it, but I do think it bothers them. So I think that it's a good thing to throttle back on anonymous sources, and we've been saying that for 30 years.